welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a stereo amplifier from a company called Apollon Audio. If you haven't heard of Apollon Audio before, you're not alone. They're a small company from Austria. They specialize in building amplifiers, not based on their own designs, but based on designs from the likes of HiFi, Ice Power, and Purify at the time of this video. They have a wide range of amplifiers from the smallest Encore 2-channel all the way up to big honkin' 8-channel amplifiers. And so, as I said, they don't design their amplifier. All of their amps are Class D, and they use modules from these other companies. They're not the only ones that do this. There are many companies that do this now, especially higher end companies like Legacy Audio, Bel Canto, PS Audio, right? There are a lot of companies out there that are really moving into this Class D world. And that's because Class D, as I said on the title of the video, it has arrived. It is now a real option for hi-fi, where it wasn't in the past couple of years. Before the past few years, people scoffed at the idea of using Class D. It was too lean, it was too strident, the highs were brittle. They had switching, people didn't like the switching power supply. The frequency was too low. All that's changed now. Okay, these HiFi Encores especially, I haven't heard the new Ice Power Edge or the Purify, but when I heard Encore, I was no longer on the Class AB train. I jumped right onto the Class D Encore train. All right, these amplifiers sound clean, powerful, zero distortion. There's no, does not sound lean. The highs are not brittle. They're crystal clear. And when I say clean and clear, I don't mean to the point where it's strident either. It goes like right up to that point of clarity without crossing the line into sounding edgy or brittle or strident. They really sound like a super powerful Class AB amp with zero distortion. I mean, that's really the best way to describe how Encore sounds to me. Another characteristic of Class D that used to be held against it was the use of switch mode power supplies. I guess I never experienced this, but people would say that they could hear the switch mode power supply. Even that has changed now. These power supplies are using a frequency a lot of times over 450 kilohertz. So not only is that way past the scope of human hearing, no driver can create that frequency. It can't produce that frequency. So it's literally not even there to hear. If this amplifier module, this HiFi Encore, was in a giant fancy hi-fi case, measured the way it does and sounds the way it does, and everyone thought it was Class AB, I guarantee it would be heralded by everyone that heard it as the greatest amplifier, or at least one of the greatest amplifiers they had ever heard, whether they were a Class D skeptic or not. One thing I've noticed watching other YouTube reviews, specifically about Class D amplifiers, especially newer Class D amplifiers, is they begin to do their normal breakdown of let's start at the treble and the mids and the bass. And what always happens is they'll talk about the upper mid-range is forward, or it's lean, or it's dry. That forwardness or that dryness in the mid-range could be the lack of harmonic distortion, no longer adding the warmth that they're used to. And that's okay. That's okay to not like that or to prefer the warm sound more. There's nothing wrong with that, right? This is all personal preference. That's what this hobby is about. I've noticed when they talk about the highs, they'll use words like bright, where again, there was actually a recent Audioholics article showing that some speakers, the frequency response changes in the highs. It starts to roll off faster with some amplifiers. It doesn't stay linear. So again, what they could be hearing is the amplifier maintaining its linearity in the highs and therefore not rolling off, and that could be perceived as bright or more forward. And again, nothing wrong with liking a more rolled off top end. It's all preference. So yeah, as I'm watching these other reviews, I mean, it's not what I'm hearing. So it's almost like, I don't know, maybe they don't want to commit. Maybe they're afraid they'll lose their audiophile card if they enjoy a Class D amplifier too much. I don't know. Just something I've noticed. Me personally, I like to provide my speakers with plenty of power. I like clarity in my amplifiers, so they're perfect topology for me, and I'm not afraid to say it. If I want to add tube sound, like I said before, I'll get a tube preamp and add it there. This amplifier we're talking about today, the NCMP400, is based on a HyperX Encore module, and that one is the NC252MP. These NCMP modules, they have the amp and the power supply in one, right? There is no input buffer or anything like that. They're all one piece, okay? So what Apollon does is they take the module and put it in a case that they have fabricated for them. And they're not the only ones using these modules either. These are OEM modules available to several different builders. Nord Acoustics is another one that comes to mind. March Audio is another one. What sets Apollon apart, for me anyway, is first of all, you get a really nice case, full-size case. This is the same case used in a couple other manufacturers. So again, they're not the only ones using this case, but very nice case, thick aluminum faceplate, great binding posts. You get a 12-volt trigger option on there, and the wiring inside of this thing is impeccable. For me, coming from building gaming PCs back in the day, nice wiring is really important. So that's actually one of the things that drove me towards buying from Apollon Audio. Everything's heat shrunk and zip tied. There's no spaghetti mess in here. You got your nice binding post, 12-volt trigger, nice black feet that match the case well. It's a nice looking piece of equipment. And now I've built several of these amplifiers myself using the modules that I bought off of eBay and cases from off of the internet as well. Wired them up myself. The issue is that's a lot of work for one. Two, hopefully you get all the parts you need. Three, you don't really have easy options for a 12-volt trigger. Most of them don't even have an option for that. So you've got to do like a ton of research online to find diagrams of how people wire these things up. It's time consuming. It's a lot of work. Getting into the sound characteristics of this amp. Again, this is using an OEM module from HyperX. There is no input buffer. So this is basically going to have a very transparent sound to it. As I said earlier, if I had to compare it to Class AB, I would say it's like Class AB with great power, zero distortion, and tons of clarity. So what you get is basically a transparent amplifier. Whatever sound you put in this amplifier is what's coming out. It's not going to add any coloration, but at the same time, it's not going to make anything sound brittle or lean or strident or too cold. The rate of diminishing returns, it nosedives very quickly after this amplifier, in my opinion. Now, if you're used to that warm tube sound, you're not going to get that from this amplifier. And I think that's the case with a lot of AB amplifiers too. Is a lot of the AB amplifiers also have some of that, what they call second order harmonic distortion, which gives it a bit of that warm sound. And again, that's not going to be here in this amplifier. So if I had to say what's the biggest difference between the Encore and even a Class AB amp, that's what I would say. I would say that extra warmth from the level of distortion from the AB is missing in the Encore. Now, if that might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing. It just depends on your personal taste. For me personally, I've said it before, if there's one piece of gear in my setup that I want complete transparency from, it's my amplifier. I'm sure you've all heard the term synergy with components and whatnot. When it comes to synergy with speakers and amplifiers, I believe, and again, I'm not an amplifier expert, but from my experience and from what I've learned, some of that synergy can come from how the impedance changes of the speaker as it's playing music impacts the amplifier and how the amplifier reacts to those changes. If the impedance is swinging all over the place during musical parts, then the amplifier has to react to those changes, and how the amplifier reacts to those changes can affect the sound. In the case of Hypex Encore, they really don't care what the impedance is. They're going to put out the power regardless of what the impedance is. So you're not going to get swings in performance from this amplifier. There's not really synergy between this amplifier and speakers. There's more of a dictatorship. Okay, whatever signal that amp is getting, that speaker's playing it. All right, there's no give and take here. It's a complete domination. Okay. What that means is it's not coloring the sound of the speaker. On the contrary, you're actually getting the real sound of that speaker. Whereas a different amplifier topology where maybe it loses power as the impedance drops, that changes the sound of that speaker, that is coloring the sound of the speaker. Listening to the Apollon audio, I get the same experience that I expected from Encore that I've experienced in the past, right? Super clear sound, zero distortion, great bass, great mids, great highs. I mean, it's just recreating the sound from your source and pushing your speakers to the performance that they were designed for and that they're capable of. I mean, what more can you ask out of your amplifier? So in this case, you no longer have to worry about synergy between your amplifier and your speaker. So you can, again, this could be a forever amplifier. It's got plenty of power. It has zero sound of its own. You could buy this and keep it forever. This could be your last amplifier. The only nit I have to pick with this amplifier is really with the case construction. And I think, as I've said before, these cases are fabricated for Apollon Audio, along with a couple other companies that use the same manufacturer, and they'll have the same issue in that the panels do not always fit together properly. So in this case, as you can see, there's a small gap on the back panel, and when you put your speaker connectors in or your XLR connectors in, it moves a little bit until it bumps up to the plate inside. So it appears there's some flex in there. And this was on my sample. I doubt that all the samples are like this. And of course, it's very, very minor. And once your connectors are put in and the amplifier is just in your rack doing its job, that's not going to have any effect on it at all. So yeah, Apollon Audio NCMP400. It's a great amplifier. Looks great, sounds great. I mean, nice clean build. Customer service is really good. Actually, this ended up getting ordered right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so there was some logistics issues, shipping. There's a couple emails back and forth with the owner. Completely professional the entire time. Super fast response. Yeah, just so great customer service on top of great product. So I definitely recommend the Hypex Encore amplifiers, and I can recommend getting them from Apollon Audio. Great job. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Have you used Class D before and you didn't like it? Did you switch to Class D and you're happy you did? Are you thinking of switching to Class D? Let us know down in the comments. And as usual, thanks for watching and have a great day.